With growing concerns of atrocity crimes being perpetrated in Sudan's conflict, questions about the ineffectiveness of international pressure and mediation efforts that have failed to arrest the conflict between Sudan's armed forces and the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces.
You have two generals that completely disregard the interests of their population, that in a struggle for power have been fighting in some situations with massacres, like the one of the Masalit that has occurred. After a gigantic effort that was led by the African Union, that established an agreement that should lead to a full democratization of Sudan. And all of a sudden, instead of implementing that agreement, they do coup d'etats, and after that they fight each other, and probably with the support in money and weapons by some others. And then people say it's the fault of the African Union or the United Nations. I think it's time to call a spade a spade. This is the fault of those that sacrifice the interests of their people for a pure struggle for power.
But the AU chief struck a more optimistic tone.
Actuellement, c'est la guerre dans le Soudan.
Currently, we have war in Sudan. We and several of our partners are working to see a cessation of hostilities. There is a process in Jeddah and Saudi Arabia. I hope, and I've been told that things are moving forward, we might see a ceasefire immediately. After that, obviously, there will be investigations, inquiries, there will be responsibilities drawn up, and we're currently focusing on stopping the hostilities. IGAD and the AU are working to launch a political process to bring them to a situation where a transition can come to an end and where elections can be held. Unfortunately, we're not there yet.
We also pressed both leaders on the growing political pressure on UN peacekeeping and political missions in Africa, after the mandate of MINUSMA in Mali was hurriedly ended at the request of the government earlier this year, with similar requests for early exits of the political mission UNITAMS in Sudan and for the long-running peacekeeping mission in the DRC, MONUSCO, to leave the country despite a continued volatile situation in the east. The SG arguing that it only makes sense to have peacekeeping missions where there is peace to keep.
Where the problems are problems of, namely, terrorism and other forms of violent extreme confrontation. Peacekeeping missions make sense in order to stabilize situations after a peace process taking place. When we have situations like the one we have in Mali, or the one we have in other areas affected by terrorism, what we need is peace enforcing and counter-terrorism operations. The UN has not the vocation to do so, the African Union has, and we fully support that should be done with African Union-led operations, with a full mandate of the Security Council under Chapter 7, and with assessed contributions decided also at the Security Council level and at the UN level.
And ahead of the COP28 Climate Change Conference, Chairperson Faki called for considerable investments in Africa and for commitments made under the auspices of the Paris Climate Change Agreement, particularly on financing, to be honoured.
Que des investissements conséquents.
We need to have considerable investment and necessary technology to be made available so that once and for all, I hope that this investment is profitable, will allow us to produce this energy to enable the African continent to have the necessary energy for its development, for its industrialization. When I said that almost half of the population doesn't even have electricity, doesn't even have electric lighting. So there is quite a specific situation on the African continent. I know that in Glasgow, decisions were made to not fund fossil fuel energies. We're all in favor of clean energy, but this has to be done gradually and depending on the needs of countries.
The partnership between the AU and the UN described as essential as the two organizations grapple with the headwinds of today's complex geopolitical realities. Shervin Riceby's SABC News, New York.